Bonjour. Yeah. Good morning. My name is Kenneth Baro. I'm President Commonwealth Cinemas back in Nigeria. You're welcome. I think we're going to kick off, and I will moderate this session that I'll be talking about financing film, Show Me the Money 2.0. But before we start, I'd like to just acknowledge some of the people here with us, some of whom will be on stage, and one person who will give a keynote speech because he has to leave earlier. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of our, keynote speaker, Mr. Roosevelt Obona, Group Managing Director, Access Bank. You're welcome. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I'll also like to acknowledge the presence of someone who has been a champion of the creative industry back in Nigeria, who was a former minister for our industry, arts, culture, and information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. You're welcome, sir. Okay. Okay. Also like to acknowledge the presence of the CEO, founding president of Ghana's National Film Authority, Black Star International Film Institute, Juliet Ashante. She in here, yeah? Okay. She's outside. Okay, she'll be in, and we'll recognize her again. Also, Imad Eskandar, head of Red Sea Fund, Red Sea Film Foundation. You're very welcome. Okay. Shari Hammond, manager, Creative Africa Nexus, Canex, Afri-Exim Bank. Okay, you're welcome. Dr. Ife Ogo, regional specialist on the African Continental Free Trade Area, United Nations Development Program, UNDP. Okay. Dr. Ogo here. She's outside. Okay. Last but not least, Colette Tusheso, CEO, Accelerate Group. You're very welcome. Okay. Okay, so just to save time, I'd like to call on Roosevelt Obona, Group Managing Director, Access Bank, to give us a keynote speech. He will have to, he's dashing out of town to catch a flight very quickly, so he'll give us his keynote speech, and then and he'll leave, but any questions that we'll have for him, he has able team to actually take those questions. Yeah. So, thank you very much.
I'm not going to pretend that my French is any good, so after bonjour, please don't ask me anything else in French. So bonjour. So thank you very much. It's always great for us to be at Cannes. I think this is the 4th or 5th year we've represented not just ourselves, but Nigeria at this festival. I think what we find extremely interesting is that we're at a junction where everyone is hungry for African content. There's some reality that the world wants something fresh. I have nothing against the traditional Hollywood faces, but it's clear that it seems the world is getting tired of seeing Brad Pitt all over again. So we just want something new, something fresh. And I think that's what the African content brings to the table. It's new, it's inspiring, it's intriguing, it's something that has never been seen before on the world stage. And I think from an African perspective, if we don't take advantage of this inflection point where we are today, it will be difficult to recover it. I think the other thing that is interesting is, I think it's Chimamanda that talked about the danger of a single narrative. The idea that we never tell our stories ourselves, and no better way to tell our stories than through our music, our arts, culture. And that's something Africa has not told excellently. I remember in secondary school, we had a novelist, Chinua Achebe, who talked about the fact that until the lion has his own historian, the hunt will always favor and glorify the hunter. And that's what Africa has suffered for many years. So we're a continent that is full of war, strife, hunger, disease, And that's all the world sees, because that's the story that is being told. There's no better way to tell our story than through what is natural to us. Every African child, irrespective of where you grew up, always remember that there was always story time by the fireplace, by the village square, where stories are being told, culture and heritage transmitted from one generation to the next. So we're born natural storytellers. We're born musicians, born artists. It's ingrained in our system. But I think we've never found a way to commercialize all of that talent that the youth in our continent have. We've not found a way to create a platform that makes it work. And conversations like this, in a venue like this, gives the African continent an opportunity to be able to tell its own story on a platform that goes global. Having a story to tell is not enough. We have to make a business of telling our story. And I think that's what has been missing for many years. So investment in ensuring that the production and the product that comes through is of international quality and best standards anywhere in the world. Ensuring that we promote it in platforms that truly give us the global presence that we desire. Ensuring that we package it right, and ultimately that we price it right for it to make business sense. A lot of those elements exist in many parts of the continent, but all four coming together has not been something we've achieved in the last 20 years. So even with the rise of Nollywood and it being producing the highest number of films across the world, it's still 10% of Hollywood, of the gross revenues that they make in Hollywood. And the question is why? We produce more films than they do in Hollywood, and we earn 10% the size. It's just we haven't put all four together. We haven't packaged it. We haven't made a business of it. And I think that's something we have to start doing when the government and private sector come together to support the creative industry to grow. In Nigeria alone, the Minister of Culture recently said that by 2030, the GDP contribution by the creative industry will go to $100 billion. We're talking 6 years from now. It's audacious, but it's doable. It just means that we have to make the right investments in infrastructure, in creating a financial hub that allows small businesses who have a creative tilt to be able to access finance. We have to work with the fiscal authorities to provide tax incentives to encourage people to go. And in Nigeria alone, if we get this right, it will employ 20 million youths. That's a lot of people who will be employed. The value chain alone is significant. I think when the minister spoke, one thing she clearly underestimated is the power of the value chain that telling the right story can do. So many businesses don't come to Nigeria today, even though Nigeria is centrally located globally. We're 6 hours from Brazil, 6 hours from the US, 6 hours from South Africa, 10 hours from Atlanta. We are one of the most centrally located country anywhere in the world. But businesses don't come to invest in Nigeria because there's a narrative. And that narrative is a negative narrative. Imagine when we export our culture, tell the Nigerian story or the African story the way it's meant to be told. There'll be more businesses who will understand that investing in Nigeria and expanding globally makes sense. I'm not preaching to you guys. At Access Bank, we've put our money where our mouth is. We've supported the arts through AFRIF, Africa Film Festival. We've supported music through our investment in Barfest. We've supported the arts through ArtX. And all of these things are not money-making venture. We understand that you have to invest first. You have to let the world understand that we're creating a platform that makes sense. We've also invested in our own TV called Accelerate TV. And that in itself creates a platform for the youths to then catalyze the knowledge and the insights that they have and bring it to life. For the last 4 years, we've brought several filmmakers through our Accelerate Filmmaker project to Cannes. We've showcased them. 2 of them have won awards at Cannes. And that's something we're extremely proud of because it's the start. Thank you. It's the start of what we imagine will be an industry that will thrive. We've also, working with the Nigerian banking industry, supported the National Art Theatre. Yet again, creating an infrastructure, a space for the creative industry to thrive. More recently, working with Afrexim and the Lagos State government, we're setting up the first creative hub in the continent. It's still at its infant stage, but between the president of Afrexim, Access Bank, and of course the Lagos State government and the Ministry of Culture, we're trying to model something and see if it works. If it does work, we want to replicate it across the continent. What the Creative Hub does is that it's an aggregation of creative minds, the arts, culture, music, and giving them access to infrastructure that makes it easier for them to develop and grow their talent. There's still so much to be done. As a bank, we are committed across the continent, and we'll continue to put our money where our mouth is. I do not stand here or sit here and suggest that we have all it takes to compete globally. I think all that is missing and where we have to invest is creating the infrastructure, creating the enabling environment, and making it interesting for investors to come into our continent, support the young talent who are there across music, across arts, and of course, to continue to invest in filmmaking. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Do have an enjoyable session for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roosevelt. I know you have to go, but can I ask for maybe 30 seconds, just on the side there or up here, and we'll take a group photograph before you go. Yeah. Okay, may I invite, up here, yeah. Sorry? Don't let him go. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we'll stay here and take a photograph. Yeah. So may I invite those who are introduced, please? So now you have to come up. Colette? No, not at all. Not at all. I think we might need to step forward. Yeah. Where's Aminata? Oh, she's outside? Okay. Juliet, please. Yeah. Who am I missing? Okay. One more person coming, please. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, and wish you a safe trip, Roosevelt. Okay. Okay. Please just have a seat whilst you're here already. So, okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Please have a seat. Have a seat. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay. Have we got everybody? Oh, okay. Dr. Ogo, right? Okay. Okay. You're all welcome. So we'll just kick straight into the rest of the morning. Okay, so we want to talk about Show Me the Money, African films, and Roosevelt has actually given us a bit of background to work with. Yeah, let me see. He spoke about, and I just summarize a bit, if I can find my notes. Okay, so Africa, looking to tell better stories, have revenue platforms, price appropriately, and we can talk about that in more detail, access to finance, job creation, changing narrative, investing locally, and accessing globally. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to kind of make it a bit spicy this morning, because for years, financial institutions, governments across Africa, individuals particularly, have been financing films, and we pretty much got African film industry where it is today, largely from individual effort. Then in the last maybe 15 years, we've now seen a lot of institutional government efforts, driving this growth. But what I noticed, being a filmmaker as well, and a cinema person, a film business person, what I noticed in the last time, we're focusing a lot so much on making films. Okay, on making films and making films better. Because what we heard years ago was that, our films are crap, quality, blah, 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 sound, the rest of them, yeah? And then a lot of creative development, creative capacity development was happening. People are now creating better films that can sell abroad, and we find them on Netflix, Amazon, the rest of them, and even in cinemas abroad. But as an industry, we're still poor in Africa. So there's something wrong. So individuals are doing it for themselves. But as an industry, there's something still wrong. So Africa Film Financing 2.0, what do we need to do to finance? So if we make films, if we teach filmmakers how to make films and they make these films, how do they make money? How do they sustain the industry as an industry, not as individuals? I don't know if you want to start from that and come this way, or we start from finance people, free exim, then get into government, and then individuals. Okay, so.
Thank you very much. I think we had really good opening speech by Mr. Ogbonna on the state of our creative sector and the talents we have, and how, as you said, there's a lot being done creatively, but how is it being reflected financially in job creation? And that's what we're trying to do at Afrexim Bank. We are a trade finance development institution, really focused on intra-African trade and putting a bigger share of Africa's exports globally. So for us, the creative sector, we've seen it's $1 billion industry, multi-billion dollar across different spaces, but so content is there, but is it distributed? So maybe we want to look at the financing we offer is across the value chain, so not just the producers, but also distributors. We also want to strengthen the infrastructure, so we're open to people setting up studios, cinema halls, cinema venues, so that populations can access this content. And I know the trend now is a lot on streaming platforms and TV, but we want also people to get into the culture of the cinema again, because that's a different experience of the creative content. And that's also more jobs, because you have spaces and all the allied services. So we are looking at also having financial products for these different people in the ecosystem, and also investing on regional collaborations and co-productions, so that there is stronger linkages between ourselves and seeing, okay, your space maybe has more cinema venues and opportunities for shooting content over there, let's go there. So we're just here in mitigating those gaps in that space across the value chain.
Okay, so if we just skip to government at this stage, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, in your past role as the Minister for the Creative Industry in Nigeria, and your current role in World Tourism Organization. So how do we then move from just financing or enabling the environment for financing production into financing those platforms where revenue can be generated? I think it's on already.
Thank you. Good morning, once again, everybody. And thank you, Ken. The governments all over the world, especially in Africa, still have the major role to play in ensuring that the creative industry achieves and exceeds its objectives. In the first instance, it is the government that will create that enabling environment in terms of regulations, in terms of laws that will attract, the investor to come into a country. If, for instance, an investor is not assured that he can take back his money after investing, he will not likely want to come to invest. And I'm glad that you raised the issue of the intra-Africa trade. I know that African Bank in the last couple of years has actually identified as one of its pillars the intra-Africa trade fair or the intra-Africa trading. However, there are two issues that we need to address for an effective intra-Africa trade. The first is the issue of connectivity. And here we must support the various governments in the single Africa air transport market. What this means in simple terms is connectivity. There can be movement of goods and people and services if you do not even have this connectivity. For instance, I had to travel a year ago to Arusha from Abuja. It took me 23 hours to get to Arusha. I flew 7 hours to Istanbul, waited for 10 hours to make a connection to Arusha, another 5 hours to Arusha. A direct flight from Abuja to Arusha is actually 5.5 hours. So you can imagine what we gain in terms of time, in terms of resources, if only there are direct flights, at least linking each African capital. The second is an issue of African passport and a borderless Africa. Today, the average Frenchman who wants to go to Lisbon doesn't need to think about obtaining a visa. He wakes up in the morning, does his passport, takes his ticket, and is in Lisbon. For me, an African, if I want to go to Uganda, I have to first go and apply for a visa. It could take 2 weeks. It will take 3 weeks. Now, if I'm a tourist and it's a choice between going to Uganda, Nigeria, or Lisbon, of course I would choose Lisbon. I would choose Madrid because of these issues. Again, the African governments were sitting on too many infrastructure. We need to release this infrastructure to the private sector to thrive. And a good example is the National Theatre in Nigeria. National Theatre was built about 47 years ago, if I remember, to commemorate the African Black and Arts Festival. And for almost 50 years, it remained comatose. It depreciated every day. And the government kept saying, this is our property. It was not doing anything for us until, may God bless his soul, the late managing director of Access Bank was then, I think, chairing the bankers committee with the then central bank governor. And they came and approached government and said, let's take over this infrastructure for you. We can invest $100 million to make it back to what it used to be. And it came to us, and I looked at it. As a minister for 8 years, I didn't have $1 million a year as capital that, I didn't have $10 million a year for a capital project. So it would have taken me 10 years as a minister to accumulate $100 million. So of course, I agreed willingly, and today, I think by end of May or so, you are ready to, commission the new National Art Theatres in Lagos. And this is probably going to be the first purpose-built modern, theater for the creative industry. We're talking about films, we're talking about concerts, entertainment, fashion, gastronomy, and the other. So governments all over Africa must please release these assets. These assets are not working for us. We don't have the capability or the capacity to maintain them. If we release them, there will be more films made, there will be better music, made, we have better concerts, and we now will stop exporting jobs to the other parts of the world. I'll run up very soon, please, Ken. You see, every year, Davido, Burna Boy, Wizkid, they all go to O2 Arena in the UK. They go to Metropolitan in the US. They come to Paris. And once they are having a show, they are sold out. 20,000, 30,000 tickets are sold out. Well, I can assure you that in Lagos alone, Davido has more than 50,000 followers. People who will be willing and ready to attend his concert.
50 million.
50,000, sorry.
50 million.
Oh, sorry, I'm so 50 million. No. Now, I'm still saying that people who would be ready and willing to attend a Davido or Wizkid or Bonobo, concert, I can see them waiting for days at the Eco Hotel. But we don't have, as of today, I might be wrong, except what we are doing in Newi. I'm not aware of one single purpose-built arena in Nigeria that accommodates 20,000 people. And this is, I think, the way to go. We must, as a government, product enable environment. We tried our best by amending the various, broadcasting codes to encourage more Nigerians. But on the part of the private sector, I think you need to take a bit more risk. You also need to talk more to government. Now, you talk at government, we talk at you. Let's create a platform to talk to one another. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alaji. If we're going to come back to you because the conversation of Africa Free Trade Area came up, but before I get to you on that and how that will help revenue generation within the film industry, let me just go to Juliet regarding what's happening in Ghana. I saw a post last year about the first cinema conference. Okay, so what is happening in Ghana, for instance, regarding the film industry and making money from it? I give you an example. In Nigeria, I think the new head of Nigerian Film and Video Censors Board is looking to shift that word censorship out and replace it with classification, which is great. So tell us what's happening in Ghana within that space.
Thank you, and hello everyone, and thank you for the acknowledgement of the Africa Cinema Summit. So a lot is happening in Ghana. Interestingly, I wear several hats as a filmmaker, as an investor, entrepreneur, and also as a government appointee. And interestingly, I was in the sector for over 30 years, realized some key gaps and thought I need to step back, get into government, help change the narrative or the infrastructure, and then I myself, as an industry person, can thrive. And what is interesting is when you talk about both government and the private space, they're looking for the same thing, which is a return on investment. That's pretty much it. And when you identify that the main gap or the main thing that everyone is looking for is a return on investment, then you also need to impact how you approach the return on investment conversation. Obviously, for the investor, they're looking for money. And so you need to show the route to money. So then you're talking about the marketplace and the value chain towards the marketplace. And so you can mention distributors, you can mention cinemas, the value chain of the marketplace being cinemas, VOD, airlines, all of those things, and the development or the lack of those things. And so the investor pretty much wants to know, how do I make my money? When do I make my money? What are the margins? All of those things. And can you show me how I will make my money? And then when you come to the government side of things, it's pretty much the same. Government is looking for how many jobs can the sector create and all of those things. How can this bring us soft power and all of those things? So once you identify for government level that, look, the industry can contribute to GDP and all of those things, then the conversations begin to change. And as a sector, we don't really have, as a continent, we don't really have data. And so the UNESCO data that came out a couple of years ago was really, really critical. And that data, for instance, shows that the entire continent has less than 1,700 screens. And you're talking about a continent of over 1 billion people. Just giving you some kind of perspective, France has over 6,000 screens as a country. And so, and then you just oppose that to the fact that Africa will have 40% of the global youth population in by 2030, and that the possibility is that we can attract over 20 billion to our GDP and employ over 20 million, whereas now we are only employing 5 million and contributing and getting 5 billion. So those are the gaps. And so with Ghana, for myself being a player and stepping into it, these elements were really, really clear to me. Developing the marketplace, developing structure, policies, and all of those things. So we set out to find within the ecosystem, and let me just mention again, within the space, when we are talking about a marketplace, we are always, as a continent, looking outside of the continent. We shouldn't be, because the biggest market is within the continent. I mean, I always use the example of children's programming alone. And so if we're going to be 40% of the global youth population and you have all of these young people not having access to content that looks like them, that's a gap. You take the typical graduate in Africa, they've never been to the cinema. So I can boldly say that over 70% of Africans have never been to the cinema. So these are some real gaps. Also, when you come to the marketplace, we are always focusing on film, the making of film, the production of film. But down the value chain, the studio, the cinema, the players, even within film, the costume designer, the props, all of those businesses need to get investment. And so for the film production ecosystem to grow, you need to invest within the businesses that support the infrastructure. For instance, Atlanta, when Atlanta introduced tax incentive, within the year, 300 new businesses were also established just because of, the thriving of production within the sector. So Ghana, we are positioning interestingly. We are saying, okay, we have all the dynamics to attract film shoots. We are looking at our strengths. We are next to Nigeria. We need to be complementary. We need to be collaborative. That's one of the things. We don't have the collaborative spirit, or we haven't done that. We need to do all of those things. So a lot of Nigerian content is happening, for instance. Perhaps Ghana may have some things that Nigeria doesn't have, so come and shoot in Ghana. Yeah. So that's one of the key things that we are doing. And then another thing is the Africa Cinema Summit. That is not something that Ghana can do alone. Africa holistically has to increase our cinema numbers. And so, of course, Ghana stepped forward and said, we are leading this, but this is an African initiative that we need, because even Nigeria has less than 300 screens. South Africa, being the largest, has a similar number of screens. So just to wrap it up, we are positioning and saying, we want to begin to work collaboratively with our African sisters and say, let's work together to open up the marketplace. Cinema is the biggest marketplace. And so the Africa Cinema Summit is the first gathering of cinema stakeholders globally on the continent to try and address those gaps. And we are also saying, if you need to develop your content on the continent or anywhere else, consider Ghana as a place to develop your content.
Okay, thanks. I wish we had like half a day, because there's just so much to talk about that's potentially coming out of Africa. So we'll come to you, Ife. So we talked a bit about intra-Africa trade. How do you see that, or what are you planning with respect to film industry and revenue generation?
Hi, thank you very much. So the AFCFTA, which is a very hard word to say, is essentially the African trade deal to say, look, we're trying to create one space, a market, by the same rules that applies to everybody. And now this covers both goods and services, which a lot of the time you would think film fits into: cultural services, creative services, that type of thing. But as we've heard, it's not just about the film itself. There's the goods, there's your equipment, there's the skills, there's the people. It's a whole thing. So I would say the first thing is not to box film into one part of the AFCFTA, but to understand that it cuts across. So whatever rules apply in textiles will apply on what you can have for your film and your costumes, right? Whatever rules you have on the people, if a professional can go from country A to country B, will apply on if you're able to shoot a film here or then, if you're able to move the skills that you want. And in terms of what the AFCFTA is, it's owned by the countries. Yes, there are institutions that support it, Bank, anyone can work on the AFCFTA. But at the end of the day, it's an African trade deal for Africa's people. And as with a lot of things on the continent, it's about seizing the opportunity. If the state parties have taken the tariffs down, if you don't apply them, you're not going to enjoy the tariffs down. Right? If they've changed the rules on services and say that now you're able to move, if you don't use those rules, if you don't go and test the rules, you're not going to know, right? The rules on IPR, on all those kinds of things. Now, we understand that there's a data gap, because a lot of the time these issues are opaque, they're confusing, they're technical. So one of the things we've done is a simple guide on, what are your rights to IP in the AFCFTA? If you create something, how do you make sure that if you move from country A to country B, I still own those rights, I can enforce those rights, I can sell them, I can lease them, I can do anything I like with them and ensure that my rights are taken care of. And this is everything from your film, to your branding, to your trademark, to whatever it is. So the thing about the AFCFTA is it can be seen as something that is done for people, but at the end of the day, it's a trade deal. If you're going to enjoy the trade deal, you're going to have to trade, in the AFCFTA. There's all kinds of resources, and I can share some at the end by email or things like that, to understand what the trade deal is, to understand what the terms of the trade deal is, and to understand how it affects Africa's people. But I think the crux of the matter is what it does is it takes away the barriers, it takes down tariffs, it takes down cumbersome rules, it eases the processes that allows people to engage across the continent. So to give you an example from another industry, because of the AFCFTA, now there are 3 trade groups that we're aware of, one in Kenya, one in Ghana, one in Nigeria. And they say, we're always exporting things to ourselves, right? The tariffs are down, so it's cheaper. But how about we, 3 trade groups, build a factory wherein when this one sends it, it goes straight there, and the inputs are done straight there, and then it's processed straight there. So what it does is, beyond the tariffs coming down, because they have now said, okay, we're going to create one place where we make our goods, is that it brings the cost of trade down. So everybody who's going to sell sends it straight to one place. Your engineer is in one place, right? The guy who will do your marketing also knows, there are 5 firms there, but I deal with one front. And so those are the kinds of opportunities that we can begin to think about for film and say, in the context of the AFCFTA, what are the hubs that can emerge to enjoy this new term? Thank you.
Can I just say, I think maybe sometime in the future, I think it might help if FCTA organizes some kind of forum with a lot of filmmakers, so these things can be broken down, we can all understand it, because I think there's huge opportunity. If we have 10,000 cinemas across Africa, even a bad film will make millions. Right. Even a bad film, yeah? So these things, and before I come to you, and the reason why, because your festival is in Saudi Arabia, correct? Yes. Saudi Arabia is my modern day model for cinemas, yeah? In the last 6 years, they opened the doors to cinemas. 2023, 57 cinemas, just under $300 million revenue. There's something about that, and I think you also should create a panel like that so we can learn the model, the India model, the South Korea model, and indeed, more recently, the Saudi Arabia model. But Colette, so I'll come back to you on that. Colette, please. So Accelerate Group, you've done a lot in capacity development, showcasing talent, particularly young people. So what's your next move with regards to, generating revenue for the industry?
Good afternoon, everyone.
We've heard about the access as a whole, driving things, but...
So I think, again, when we launched Accelerate, we saw a gap in the market. There wasn't enough content that was being created by young people and for young people, especially in our field. And we wanted to be that platform that would introduce young filmmakers, young content creators to Nigeria and to the rest of Africa. But one of the things that we saw we needed to do was capacity building because we didn't have enough of it at the time. And I'll just give you a quick story. I went to film school a few years ago, and the director was talking about making a film from inception to completion, and he said it takes about 10 years. And I laughed and I said, have you been to Nigeria? We can do it in 5 days, and he looked at me and he said, it's impossible. And I said, it is very possible. Please come to Nigeria and we'll show you how we do it, because it's about that skills transfer as well. So we saw the gap. I was lucky enough to be able to afford to go to film school in the US, but you find that a lot of our, youth and a lot of our African kids can't. So we need to start looking at how do we develop our own film schools? How do we also capacity build so that when we start talking about content, because it's a huge ecosystem. First of all, for us to be able to even make the films that will meet everybody internationally, we need to make sure that we've also understood the skills gap. So if you've been to Nigeria, you'll not see a New York Film School. You'll not see, even other parts of Africa, you'll see courses, but you will not see a institution that's just dedicated to training people in that film, in that side. So, cameras, lighting, sound, all those are technical skills that you should know about. So one of the key things that we started something called the Accelerate Filmmaker Project, which really looked at people under 35 years old that were interested in the film and TV space. And we've been lucky enough to work with our greats across the board that will come in, they will train, they'll facilitate, and they'll become mentors to these young people. And what we also do is we have a film fund. So if these young people have good ideas, once they finish their training, we'll then say, okay, you know what, pitch to our mentors who are leading directors, producers, and film industry greats. And they get an opportunity to pitch. Once they've pitched, we take the best 5 and we bring them to life. And then what we also do, because collaboration and partnerships is key for us, we partner with AFRIF, the African International Film Festival. I'm looking forward to partnering with you as well, and with you in Ghana as well. And we give a platform for our young filmmakers to show their first film. Luckily enough, we've been able to, as Roosevelt said, with the partnership with Access Bank, partnership with AFRIF as well, we've been able to go far and wide with some of these stories. And what is really important, again, as Roosevelt said, is how do we tell our own stories? How do we own our own narrative? And how do we, which is so important for me, create spaces for young people to be able to do that, because we have a youthful population and we need to start opening the doors for them. So what we do with that as well is, once we invest in the training, we give them opportunities to showcase, and then we also, through our partnership, take them to other courses around the world. And then from that, we found that some of our guys, when we talk about the financing, they've gone ahead to build their own production companies. They've gone ahead to win awards where they're in the position to start making award-winning films. So in terms of capacity build and impact, we probably impacted at least 100,000 young people with just the training that we've done. And we see that also in money that comes in. One of our young trainees, he had one of the biggest films in Nigeria, The Ghost in the Tout 2, and that made millions in the box office. He came in through our training and was able to build up his own production company and start working. So that's what we're trying to put in place in terms of, let's get the foundation right, and then let's start investing and looking at interesting projects that we can invest in. And we also have an opportunity for young people to come in with their ideas, and we'll fund those ideas and bring it to life.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Can I also highlight and emphasize, please, a lot of that capacity development? Can you develop a specific session for the business of film?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's lacking in Africa.
So we have that. We've actually had...
Sorry, I just wish we had a lot of time, because we just got 5 minutes to go, and I want to hear about from Imad. Thank you.
Yep. First of all, assalamu alaikum, everybody. And see, in both of our cultures, neighbors are family. And please take us as neighbors, because we are neighbors, We're just 1 hour away from Ethiopia, and we're just right there, I want to answer the first question that you asked, the spicy one, I want to talk to the filmmakers, because we can talk numbers all day long. Everybody has a website. You can just go there and just check, It's controversial what I'm going to say next, because we are in a film festival, but I have to say this. In countries that just emerge and they start telling stories, I believe aiming for festival is misleading. What I mean by this is, when you want to aim for a film festival from from any kind of continent. A lot of filmmakers think what works, what makes me into this festival. So now you don't tell the story that you want to tell, you tell the stories that works there. Not many festivals want to see skyscrapers in Africa. Not many. They want to see the mountains. They want to see, I don't know if I can say this, but the rape childs. They want to see these stories. I'm not saying they're not reality. I'm sure they're the reality. There's a lot happening. But again, I would give it to, I would talk to the filmmakers and say, first of all, it starts with the story. Tell the story that you want to tell. I see this being misleading even in the Arab world, where our films, like, how should I put this? I believe you should aim for, not all of them, obviously, both, there should be a balance, both should coexist, but aim for genre films. You just started telling stories, and you cannot recite a poetry in a language you just learned. And you, see, we all know what is an American geek. As soon as I say that, we have a picture. What is a geek from Ghana? What is a geek from Saudi Arabia? We're not the same. We don't have hackers. A geek in Saudi Arabia is a dude who's into Japanese animation and gaming. You got me? You guys wouldn't know that. And even we Saudis, when we write films, our stereotypes, we think about the Hollywood stereotypes. So first of all, we as filmmakers, we need to talk what is what. Don't put the international standards on your country. Don't. You just started telling stories. I don't know. It's different from a city to city in each and every country, you know? So first of all, I have to tell the filmmakers, do the story that you want. Don't aim for festivals in the beginning. We don't know nothing. You guys know nothing about us. We know nothing almost. Second thing I would say, see, we're all here to show you the money. Just make sure you don't send all the money to other countries. Keep some of that money. Artists never throughout history, artists were never challenged, always. Like Da Vinci did a lot of things for his kings and stuff, you know? And if he didn't do that sculpture or painting, they would, you know, he would be executed. But the artist delivered that brief and put his touch into it, and they're legends now. So it starts from the filmmaker. Religions went throughout globe, like the global impact through the stories and the books. Take any religion, remove the stories. You'll have a refrigerator kind of a manual. You got me? Stories, yeah. So just aim for the stories.
Thank you very much. Just 2 more minutes to go. And thank you all for your contribution. And I really, really pray that at some point, maybe individually, your organizations can set up platforms, where filmmakers, because I know, I'm in the business of film. I'm also in the creativity of film. I know what the creative guys, I know a lot of them are so focused on the creativity, they don't know how distribution, exhibition works, but hearing from you and your platforms will help a lot across Africa. Recently, the government of Saudi Arabia, because when we build some of these exhibition platforms in Africa, we overprice. And Roosevelt was talking about it, to watch a film in cinemas across West Africa, in English West Africa, you got to be at top of the pyramid, to be able to afford cinemas. Whereas India has a great model, the government of Saudi Arabia is looking today at incentivizing cinemas to drop their prices so a huge population of people can go, so there's a lot to talk about. I wish we had a platform. So thank you very much. I think our time is up, and thank you all for joining in, and thank you, Aminata and the Africa Pavilion for hosting this, for allowing us talk to you a little bit about Africa and the opportunity to make money from Africa. Thank you. Thank you. To inform you that any